Divine to me, to you.
The power of the divine to carry us through stuff. I would suggest that it's the divine part of us that makes us strong in the broken places, yes? And just for the sake of hearing it, has anyone else ever had something creative like that just kind of download? See? Not weird. You're one of us. It's very precious, right? When it all just kind of happens. And there's actually a Greek term for that called eudaimonia. Even the Greeks knew about it. And it's funny that you should bring that up because yesterday I was watching a David Letterman interview of Jay-Z, and they were talking about the exact same thing. So, third time, maybe I should be paying attention. I'm just saying. So happy Father's Day. Happy Father's Day to everybody who has fathered, who is grandfathering, who is both mother and father. On Mother's Day and Father's Day, I do the same spiel, just because I know that there are people who maybe had a rough time with their parents, or maybe are having a rough time with both parents and children. We are the sandwich generation. And so what I want you to remember is that even if there's very little for you to celebrate in terms of that father-child relationship, there's something, and you can always celebrate the divine parent, the divine father that lives in you and might be reparenting your inner child right now so that you learn to lean on divine father, the divine masculine, to get you through those rough times, to help you manifest. As we understand the divine masculine and the divine feminine are very different from male and female. Yes? First of all, we always understood male and female as binary. We're finding out that in this day and age, it's more of a continuum. There's two poles and there's a whole bunch of room in the middle. And so when I talk about divine masculine and divine feminine, I am talking about something that you have within you, both of them. And we need both of them. Queen Latifah was once asked, what would life on this planet be without men? And her answer was, there'd be a lot of fat and happy women. But I would suggest to you that it's, the same thing. What would life on this world be without women? The answer and I can't remember who to attribute to, was lonely. But you kind of need both to create the next generation. So I would suggest to you that without either males or female, masculine or feminine, it would be empty. Very empty. In the physical sense, because we'd all die off. Yes, we've been doing estate planning. I'm thinking a lot about dying off these days. But if we can celebrate and cherish both the divine masculine and the divine feminine in us, what I see is that we end up with moms and dads that are wonderfully healthy, that are giving, that are generous, that know that they can be soft. I was reminded this past week during a training that in my working with domestic violence days, which were very short, I got fired. But gently, there was no violence involved. We were taught that in this culture, the one emotion women are not allowed is anger. And men have the flip side. The only emotion that they are taught they're allowed to have is anger. Not allowed to be soft, not allowed to be silly, not allowed to be hurt. I am so happy to see that changing. I am so happy to see that, and it's not like in the last 5 minutes. I'm watching my brother as he raises his kids, and he is the one that puts them to bed. Apparently, mom can't do it right. You know that thing about mom doesn't cut the sandwich that way. My nieces and nephew are like that with their dad, and who gets to put them to bed? They have their little ritual. And so I am so excited to see us balancing divine masculine and divine feminine in each of our own bodies. And I love seeing how it has changed at least what the media says a dad can be. I think it leads us to a much healthier place when we can be honest with who we really are. Yes? So I just want to remind you that we all need both of those. The divine feminine is about being. The divine masculine is about doing. And so there's a story that I learned as a Sufi teaching story, where there was a great master who would sit up in his, basically he was up the mountain in his cave. And one of the practices they had was they had these string bags. And for desert people, wasting water is a really bad idea. So one of their really powerful demonstrations was that they would sit there, they would pour water into this string bag, and a true master could make the bag hold the water. And so there was this master who was known for being able to do that. And so anytime he came into town, he would come carrying the string bag with him full of water to announce that he had this wonderful, powerful connection with the divine. Well, just so happened he grew up there and he still had some of his childhood friends in that town. And so one day he went to one of his friends who was a cobbler just to say hello and how are you, and, you know, I'm still here. And the cobbler said, you know, I really, really need to run down the street for just a minute. Could you stay here and just greet the people who come in? You don't have to do any of the work. Just greet them. And so he, being a very generous person, did that. Well, a minute or two turned into 5 minutes, turned into 10, turned into an hour, because you know how that goes, right? You try and walk down a street in your hometown and 15 people need to tell you what your parents have been up to, right? Or your kids. When the cobbler came back, the great master's water bag was empty because he had gotten distracted by all of the other things in life. And he was very upset because this was a huge part of his identity. But his cobbler friend said, don't worry about it, I have an extra one, and held up a string bag full of water. The true mystic can be as whole and as connected while alone as with other people. A true mystic, a truly strong divine masculine, can hold that strong beingness while walking around town and doing your everyday things. And so I would suggest to you on Father's Day that as you go out into your world, as you go out and father your life, you create your life, it is a truly mystical act, whether it's, just pulling from my past couple weeks, painting a bathroom, cleaning a house, choosing colors, building things, picking up trash. All of that is, or at least can be, high spiritual practice if, while you're taking out the trash, you are also communing with the divine within you. And by communing, I don't mean you need to learn Latin or Sanskrit or Hebrew or ancient Greek. I mean, there's a conversation, you know there's going to be a conversation going on inside of you anyway, right? Whether it's the, you did this wrong, you did that wrong, fat and happy, nah. You know, whatever. There's going to be a conversation going on. And if you can make the conversation, what a beautiful shade of blue the sky is. Thank you, divine being, whatever your name for the divine being might be. Oh, look, there's one bird right up on top of my tree, and it's calling me. And it's like one of those almost invisible branches. stopping and recognizing that and celebrating that, that is an act of gratitude. When you look upon beauty and notice it consciously, that is an act of gratitude to the divine being who made it. Oh, look, I did not go with my old knee-jerk reaction of rescuing that person. Thank you, God. I'm very uncomfortable right now. Thank you, God. You better make this right. For me, sometimes prayer looks like, wow, this is a really messed up situation. I can't wait to find out what you're going to do about it, God. I'll be here. You need to hurry up. Last night I went out and we watched Frederick Carruthers and Jackson play some jazz to celebrate Father's Day. And I was sitting at the table, and I guess I've said it too many times because I said, I really need to finish my talk. It just hasn't finished yet. And that is not up to me whether it finishes. I'll write a talk, but I know whether it's the talk. So this morning I woke up and I said, oh, thank you, God, for coming through. I understand what the talk's about now. That's the Divine Father doing in the world from a strong sense of being, which is the divine feminine. And so we really need both. We need that absolute sense of faith that most children have. In my family, there's a story about my sister Kelly, who many of you know. And Dad was getting ready to go on a year-long, he was being stationed in Okinawa, and we were staying in America. He was trying so hard to get this house ready for us to actually be able to live in. And so he was out back, and it was one of those things where the deck came out, but the land came down, and so there was a walkout basement thingy. He was working on making sure those supports were strong. And he heard, "Catch me!" And Kelly jumped from the deck. Kelly has not changed a bit, except that Dad probably couldn't catch her anymore. That absolute faith of "catch me, Daddy," that is what I would invite you to have with your Divine Father. I don't suggest you try that particular that particular act with your human father, because you might squish him. But that level of absolute faith that I can go out into the world and there will be something that catches me every single time, that will carry me through, that will do for me in such a way that it all turns out beautifully. Has anyone ever experienced that sense of, okay, catch me. I'm about to walk off a cliff, and it works out? Ernest Holmes says, what does Ernest Holmes say? One of the greatest difficulties of the new order of thought, we're called New Thought. Has anyone had one lately? Okay. One of the greatest difficulties of the new order of thought is that we are likely to indulge in too much theory and too little practice. Have you heard that one before? We can discuss oneness and we can discuss cosmology and mysticism until other people are throwing up. But who wants to get up and go out in the world and live from it? That's the hard part. As a matter of fact, we only know as much as we can prove by actual demonstration. If I am saying that I have absolute faith in the divine to source my income, but I'm afraid to leave my safe government position because, ministry is a lot less safe than a union position that is part of an office that is mandated by the Constitution. I worked for the Public Defender's Office. I could never be fired. If I had been saying, I absolutely believe in this stuff, but refuse to leave that job, then I didn't really know this stuff. Now, my mother pushed as hard as she could to make me stay where I had health insurance. She didn't understand that, no, I cannot just do this on the weekends. Which is weird, because both of her brothers were priests. You'd think she'd know. But being able to stay in that knowing. Sometimes you need Divine Father to come up and kind of whap you upside the head and say, hello, are you awake? Did you forget how this works? When I was about to graduate from ministerial school, there was an opportunity to go to the Parliament for World Religions in Melbourne as a chaperone. I swear to God, the kids chaperoned me because I didn't know what I was doing. It worked out rather well, actually. But I was going into my story about I don't have that kind of money, I can't do it, blah, blah, blah. And the person in front of me, God bless her incredibly divine masculine heart in that moment, said, "Do you believe this stuff or not?" I see. We're going in that direction now. We're having those conversations. Truly, truly, I say to you, this stuff works. All you need to do is have a dream that you're willing to do the work for, that you're willing to not just sit on your couch and say, Om. Om, I am the president of Burundi. Never made a president of Burundi. Not from somebody else's couch in the basement. But if you are willing to say, I have a dream to use my divine creative power to do music, like several of you guys do, to use my divine creative power to make sure that the building gets painted, to make sure that as I go out into the world, I feel good about what I'm doing around homelessness. If you will get up and use that divine knowing that you do have, that is the divine masculine acting through you. And that is demonstration. Demonstration will not happen unless you're willing to have it happen. Only as much good as you are willing to accept can fit into your life. How much good can you have? As much as you're willing to accept, and the amount of good that there is infinite. So there's an old question about, do you go to the ocean with a thimble or a bucket? Are you going to just have a teeny tiny bit of good in your life, or are you going to take in as much as that great big old bucket will hold? I would suggest to you that you bring a bathing suit instead. Because there's plenty of it, and you can splash around all day and just soak it in. My life is proof of that. And for everyone who goes out and does it, I would be willing to bet there were parents behind them who told them that it was okay to accept good and more good and more good. I was also watching David Letterman interview Malala, and please, God, let me say this correctly, Yousafzai. Malala. And she talked, she's gotten some pretty good recognition, especially after she won the Nobel Peace Prize. What she did that was amazing was not getting shot by the Taliban. What she did that was amazing was continue to have been doing what she was doing after she got shot. And she's very clear that, she has no hatred for the Taliban. The person who shot her was her age, 14. And so she can't hate him. But as much recognition and adoration as she gets, she attributes all of her ability to do this to her father, who raised her saying, you deserve all the same good your brothers should have. You need to get an education. And in that time, it was a little dangerous to be sending your kid to school. Your female kids, anyway. She said that not only was her father a teacher, but her grandfather was a teacher, and so were all of her uncles. The divine masculine was out there in the world, speaking truth and showing it to the world. Look, women, everybody deserves to have this good. Let's raise all boats with one tide. I'd ask you, though, to also consider that this is the father who, having taught her that, begged her not to use the word Taliban when she went out and spoke her word from the stage. Did she listen? No. He was asked, would you stop your daughter from doing it now that you've seen how much you can get hurt? And he said, have you met her? I can't keep her from doing anything. Because he spoke his word about her power, and then had to live with the results. And that just kind of is what it is. There is nothing in this teaching that will tell you that when you start to grow, when you are doing your spiritual work, you will be fully comfortable. I can almost with 99.9% conviction say you will be completely unhappy that you started this process at some point in your process. At some point, you're going to be like, why did I do this? Why did I wake up spiritually? This stinks. But there's another word in the back of my head you know I'm thinking. This is messed up. Same thing about the word in the back of my head. I got woken up, and all of a sudden my friends don't like me anymore because I've changed and we don't fit together. Not all of them. This doesn't happen every time. Sometimes it's you cannot stay in the relationship you were in. That was destroying you. You cannot stay in the profession you were in. Hello, I had seniority in a union job and nothing to do all day except play on their really good internet. But no, you people happened. If you cannot demonstrate, then you don't really know it, and that doesn't make you bad. It makes you in process. In your process, you may well have moments where you're still figuring out the details of the truth that you choose to know. There are still little bits and pieces of it being added. It's kind of like the recipe that, someone else has been doing forever, so when they scribbled it down, they forgot to say add salt or how much salt. You're going to have to do some experimenting, and you're going to have to fall down a few times. If you are truly pushing your growing edge to its limits, if you are truly making a bigger container for good, you're going to have to do some experimentation. Remember, this is religious science. We get as much information from the experiments we do that don't work as from the ones that do. And so as we push our boundaries into greater and greater good, Divine Father giving us the energy and the direction to go out into the world and do these things, you might hit a few bumps. Is it worth it? Abso-frackin-lutely. Absolutely. Yes, there will be bumps. So what? There's bumps on a roller coaster and we all still get on it, right? Well, some of us do. I'm getting looked at like, oh, heck no. I'm not silly, but that's part of the fun. If a roller coaster was from point A to B straight across, would anyone get on? Especially since it's really just a flat loop. That's called like your morning commute. But if your morning commute still had the wee on it, it might be a different experience. And so I ask you to consider that thing that the divine feminine is within you, that beingness, really, really must be born into the world as the divine masculine. And God is calling. That's fine. Don't worry about it. God is calling one of you guys to hear that line. So let me say it again if I can remember what I said. What I'm getting at is the Emerson quote from Self-Reliance about nothing is at last sacred but the integrity of your own mind. The integrity of your own mind, that divine feminine, that being part of you, is the most sacred thing. And if you are living it out in the world, then that is what Emerson talks about as true courage. And so I invite you to remember that this stuff really does work. And if you will run the experiment of seeing if you will be supported in your heart's dream, you will be. It might be a bumpy road sometimes, but that's why we come together to practice. This is the village that cobbler was walking around in and carrying his string bag full of water. Yes, there are soul practitioners who can do all of this stuff by themselves. This is a higher spiritual practice. And so I would invite you to join me now in prayer as we do that spiritual practice. And this spiritual practice is what we call affirmative prayer. We affirm the truth that we already know. And so join me now. You can close your eyes if that's comfortable for you, or just whatever prayer looks like for you physically. We remember, we know this absolute truth, and this absolute truth says that we are one, that there is one mind, one power, one presence that is at work in this universe. Some people call it God, some say Allah, some call him Bodhisattva. It has many, many names, but there is one, only one, and we are part of it. We are not able to be separated from it. So the old idea about hell and being cast away from God, we now know to be a falsehood. We now know to be a misunderstanding of the true relationship of the divine and the human. They are one. And so I celebrate that oneness as I and we go out into the world and live as divine beings, creating good and more good for our brothers and sisters who may not recognize themselves yet. Creating good and more good, living according to this beautiful dream that each and every one of us has. A dream of peace, a dream of joy, a dream of pure and beautiful creativity. What I know is that as we live that, we are expressing the divine, allowing Spirit to experience the world through each and every one of us. And because there's nowhere else to go and nothing else to do but be that divine being, I celebrate that we are now awake to it, awake to the truth of who we really are. Absolutely trusting in a truth that we know to be true deep in our guts, with the same daddy catch me energy that children have. I bless that truth. I know it is the truth, and there is nothing for us to do except accept it and let it be. And so it is.